Good evening, everybody. This month, as Leon said in class tonight, we'll be working through the themes about the beginning of our faith that we see in Genesis. So tonight, I thought it would only be appropriate to start off in Genesis. When we look at Genesis, we see where everything started, and I want to take a look in the very beginning, in chapter 1 here, of the famous creation narrative. I want to take a look about how God kicked it off in a very interesting and specific way here at the beginning of Genesis to start our conception of who God is and how he works. And so in Genesis chapter 1, it just says in verse 1, famously, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God called the night day, and the darkness night. So the evening and morning were the first day. And so here, right at the beginning, we see the first thing God makes out of anything is light. And not specifically the sun or something like fire, something that we know that produces light, but in the physical world, the first thing he brings about is light itself. Something that distinguishes what darkness is and separates it. Something that exposes things for what they are, even if creation was still unformed at this point, for whatever that means. I don't necessarily understand what that means. But we're built on that a little bit when you look at John as well. If you'll turn to the Gospel of John, John very profoundly echoes the creation narrative and the creation account when he describes to us who Jesus was, and we get a bit more of an insight about this beginning element, for lack of a better term, that we see in creation here. John chapter 1, starting in verse 1, in the beginning, there it is again, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. This man came for a witness, to bear witness to the light, that all through him might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light. That was the true light, which gives light to every man coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become the children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of man, nor of flesh, nor the will of man, but of God. And so you get this extremely profound passage here that, of course, we don't have time to dive into tonight. We could spend a very long time unpacking everything that means. But for the purpose of our talking tonight, we see here again that the Word that made the light is also at the same time the truest source of what light is itself. And that was the first thing that he brought into the world at the beginning. And just like the light at the beginning of Genesis, Jesus here establishes a separation between the light and the darkness and sheds a light, and Jesus expounds on that in John chapter 3, talking to Nicodemus. As the light, he sheds light on how things are, and that's how, and bearing the truth in that way. And so one of the most important things to remember when we're reading Genesis, really just like anywhere else in the Bible, is that when we read the beginnings that we see in Genesis, we're really reading about Christ. Just like we're really reading about Christ when we look at the prophets or when we look at the Psalms. And in the same way, we see our beginning and the existence's beginning, as we know it, in Genesis, and we see the beginning of Christ's earthly time in the beginning of John. We also see the beginning of our hope and the beginning of everything that Christ was leading up to in his resurrection. And I don't believe it's a mistake that, much like God established the Sabbath as a rest because he too rested on the seventh day of creation, that it's on the first day of the week, much like the first day of creation, that we see the light resurrect, the bearer of the light. And if you turn to Mark chapter 16, you see that's exactly what happens. And then obviously all four Gospels make an account of this, because this is the everything that Christ's mission pivoted on while he was on the earth. Mark chapter 16, starting in verse 1. Now when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices that they might come and anoint him. Verse 2, very early in the morning, on the first day of the week, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. And they said among themselves, who will roll away the stone from the door of the tomb for us? But when they looked up, they saw that the stone had been rolled away, for it was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man clothed in a long white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who is crucified. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. And so here we see a whole nother beginning in the resurrection, the manifestation of our hope that shed a light on what God's mission was. And the way God began everything here is the same way Jesus began his mission, is the same way existence was begun in the first place, and that was with light in one form or another. And for us tonight, for the purposes of this invitation, the light is what reveals us for who we are. And ultimately, whenever we start and whenever we restart in Christ, it is what is our hope and a new beginning. Christ is our light. That is our beginning for our own faith. And so tonight, this is a simple invitation to invite you to come to the light and to reveal yourself to Christ for who you are, that he may redeem you and make you into what he would have you to be. If you would step into an aisle and make your way to the front as we stand and as we sing.